hour too.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining Apollo's Nonprofit Bites and Insights. So today we are kicking off our four-part Shields Up Cybersecurity webinar series, and we are starting with our panel discussion. This is a four-part series, so starting September 15th, we are going to have 3 weekly webinars on specific different cybersecurity topics. So that includes understanding the risks of working remotely, low-cost best practices and tools, and also business email safety. So my name is Yen-Ting Liu. I am a program associate with Aparo. I'm going to be taking us through our housekeeping items and Aparo introductions, and then I will be turning it over to our panel moderators. So let's start off with some housekeeping. If I can change my, there we go.
Bathrooms are down the hall and to the left.
Thanks, Tim. So yes, this webinar is being recorded and it will be added to Aparo's website. This link will actually give you access to all previous recordings, webinar recordings, if you'd like to view those as well. All attendees today will receive a follow-up email from me, so I'll be sure to include that link for you, as well as a PDF of this deck. Also, I'm thinking that there's going to be a lot of resources that come up during our conversation today, so I will be diligently writing those down and including it in that email for you guys as well. Chat box is available for you to use. If you have joined us in the past, you know what I'm going to ask you. Please go ahead, warm up that chat box, drop your name and what organization you're with. Now, throughout our conversation today, please continue to use that chat box for any questions or comments. We will do our best to leave some Q&A time at the end to address those. And then finally, closed captioning is available. If you look on the toolbar, there should be a button that says live transcription. If you click on that, you'll be able to show or hide the subtitles. Hey, W, are you raising your hand? Did you want to say something? Okay, we'll figure that out in a moment. Let's move forward. So Aparo. For those of you who don't know, Aparo is a nonprofit that helps other nonprofits doing some amazing work in the community, and we help them by addressing any of their technology or business process needs. Now this, more people raising their hands. Okay. If you could keep your hands down until later on, until we can figure out how to address that, that'll be great. So this model that you see, this is how we structure our organization to serve our mission. So you can see Aparo is in the middle, connecting nonprofits with skilled volunteers in the areas of advice, education, and solutions. So really quickly, high level, what falls under these buckets. Under advice is essentially our one-on-one consulting service. So we will match you with what we call our tech therapist to discuss any of your technology needs, get coaching, get guidance. This is also a really great way to get started if you don't know where to go next. Under education, we have team trainings and workshops, and you've guessed it, our nonprofit bites and insights. And then also under our solutions, we have our solution-based projects. So a really popular example is if you are in search for a CRM, we will connect you with a volunteer or a team of volunteers to help you make that selection. So I wanted to highlight this team training opportunity. We are talking about cybersecurity, and I anticipate that throughout this series, a common theme or advice that our experts are going to give us is to have an annual awareness training. So just wanted to throw it out there that at Aparo, we do have volunteers who are ready to offer some cybersecurity team trainings for you. And what would be unique about these trainings is that the training and recommendation will be tailored to what your nonprofit currently uses, any of your technology tools that you currently use, and also where you and your staff are at in terms of your end user knowledge. And these are just examples of what could be included in your customized team trainings. Finally, if you are interested in any of our services or just want to stay connected with us through our newsletter, don't hesitate to visit our website, aparo.org, or subscribe to our email list. I've also included my email address if you want to connect with me directly, and I can definitely help direct you to the right direction. And I think, yep, that is it for me. I am now happy to turn it over to esteemed leader, Aparo's very own CEO, Kim Lanphier, to lead this panel discussion. Kim?
Thank you so much, Yenting, and I'm honored to be here. You're going to be hearing from some great panelists. And I'm going to kick us off with one slide. I'm probably going to not go through the others, Yenting. I'm going to get us right into this conversation because I know how much folks want to learn. So I just want to talk a little bit about set the tone here for why security matters to you. And I will tell you, this is directly stolen from one of our wonderful volunteers at our Growth and Innovation for Nonprofits program, GAIN, because it summarized it so well. I was like, I don't need to do work on this. There it is. So there's a lot going on in the world right now, and there has been for 2 years. And so the media is really focused elsewhere. We've got a war in Ukraine. We've got COVID still going on. We've got monkeypox. We've got things that have got media focused everywhere. So they're not talking about cyber hacks as much as they were. It's not as sexy for the news cycle, but they're still happening. And you still need to be aware of them, even if they're not in the news. Phishing is the most common attack, which is when you receive an email that has a link in it, or a text that has a link in it even, and you click on that link and you shouldn't. So as a result, a lot of the easiest ways to help you with security come from training employees not to click on those links. And 80 to 90% of companies are seeing some sort of attack. If you look at this slide, you'll see ransomware is holding a steady but still very high risk. Phishing attacks are, as always, very strong. Remote workers are an opportunity for threat actions. Now that we have so many of us working remotely, we're all logging into different internet sectors. We're all using PCs and phones in places where we weren't many years ago. And so there's a lot more vulnerability out on what they call the fringe versus internally in the company's main systems. The vulnerability is out on that fringe where your phone is and where your PC is in your home. Supply chain attacks are on the rise, with all of the supply things that have been going on. So if you have vendors who are connected to you, if you're buying anything from anyone, they are in that supply chain. And so using you to get to them is something that can happen. The Ukraine and Russian conflict are also creating cyber attacks. Russia is known for its very professional hacking systems. They pay people to get better at it all the time. And so that is part of the network of security that you need to be aware of. And this bullet point that I don't know as much about, but our panelists I'm sure can talk to, that the cloud attacks are up 7-fold. So we're seeing a lot of attacks out there. And I just skip forward to, if you would, Yenting, thank you. And so today, Yenting gathered your questions, and this is what we're going to be going through today, are these 5 questions that you've sent in. So we know we're going to be talking on things that people in the room want to hear about. We're going to be going through general best practices for security. Then we'll dive into security best processes. And then we'll talk about considering third-party vendors in your solution for security, what's good and what's bad about those options. Talk a little bit about Microsoft versus Google and security, and then end with current trends. And there's a lot to go through. So with that, I am going to have our panelists introduce themselves, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves using a question: why should nonprofits take cybersecurity seriously? Why does it matter in the nonprofit space when we're small and we don't have a lot of data, not like Target does? And then let us know who you are as well, your name, your title, and your company. Noah, we'll start with you because you're at the top of my screen.
Okay, that works. My name is Noah Davis, and I work for Train Technologies. I've been here about 15 years, and I had our security operations function. So when you think about that from a cybersecurity aspect, when things go bump in the night, I'm the guy that gets called. I can reiterate that we see all the things that Kim mentioned from kind of the GAIN workshops. Why not-for-profits should take cybersecurity seriously? From what I see on a day-to-day basis, and we track and monitor all the threats that come at our organization, you will be experiencing similar things that we do. So you're going to see people that try to phish or smish, which is when they use your cell phone to try to get your information. And there is value in the data that you have. There's recent court cases that just came out that I was watching in my blogs this morning about, I think it was Kosovo company that had, they're getting fined by the FTC for privacy information that they track through mobile cell phone usage, right? So you really want to think about it from the aspects of what can you control and doing the bare minimum. So I have an analogy there that might help to understand it. There are two guys in the woods and they run into a bear, right? One guy freaks out, the other guy starts bending down to tie his shoe. The other guy that was freaking out looks at him and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" He goes, "I don't even have to be the fastest person here. I just have to be faster than you." So ultimately, from a not-for-profit perspective, that's really where you want to look at yourself, right? There's always going to be a cost versus benefit analysis there, but you don't want to be the lowest hanging fruit. And with that, I'll hand it over to another panelist.
I'll go. My name is Angie Bush. I'm the Executive Director at Hospitality House of Charlotte. I've been here for 16 years. And when I started, fun fact is that when I came in, we had dial-up at that time. So today, when I think about why should nonprofits take cybersecurity seriously, I think of three main reasons in my mind that kind of resonate with me. First of all, is that nonprofits tend to have fewer resources. So we have all of the same exposure, but often fewer resources at our disposal. And frequently we lack internal people that are dedicated to taking care of keeping us safe and building any controls in for us. And I mean, that makes sense. I mean, we're busy trying to run our missions. So that totally makes sense. Another reason that I see is that we are, by and large, a trusting population. So we tend to attract people to work for us with a certain worldview. And we tend to be maybe a little bit less suspicious and not very calculating. So the social engineering aspect of cyber attacks are an easier target for us. So while we're hiring people that are looking for yes and here to help, that also might lead us to being more at risk. So those two things together, I think also lead us to be maybe a little slower to respond. So that would be the third thing that I would say about this is that our incident response might be a little slower. We may be a little less willing to prosecute, just wanting to kind of protect our reputations from donors and that kind of thing too. So I think those three things are a reason we should take cybersecurity really, really seriously.
All right, I guess that leaves me. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jeff Garrett. I'm VP of Solutions Architecture at Opcala. We're a trusted advisor consulting firm that works with organizations of all types, commercial, nonprofits, across all kind of areas, and helps bring in providers, helps bring in solutions, helps just solve problems in the areas of technology. I'm actually fairly the new guy here. I've been at Opcala for 6 months now, but prior to here was in the reseller world for 11 years and on the customer side with a manufacturer, global manufacturer for 9 years. So I've been doing this for a while, covering a lot of areas of IT. Why is cybersecurity important to the nonprofit world? I'll take a little bit different approach, and I think Noah and Angie touched on some really good areas, but one thing that's becoming more and more apparent in the security world with threat actors is deliberate attacks. I think where a lot of attacks used to be, and still are to some extent, just kind of spammed out to everybody, see who grabs onto it. Threat actors are now getting more targeted. And nonprofits, I mean, you're part of the supply chain for other people, and that you hold information that could be valuable in what they call spear phishing, those targeted attacks where you're actually trying to go after a certain individual, and you're putting together a campaign around maybe a high level person at another company that may be a donor to one of your organizations. And so that information can be used by threat actors to go target somebody else that's maybe even outside of your four walls. So everybody holds valuable information, whether it's used against you, whether it's in a direct attack against you. It could be information that's used against another organization, another company, somebody else you have interactions with. So I think that's why, even when you think, oh, we're too small, we shouldn't be worried about this, that everybody has a role to play in cybersecurity.
Absolutely, absolutely. A lot of black market value to a lot of data points, and that we have those data points in our nonprofits too. So I want to move back to Angie with a question talking about kind of the general best practices around cybersecurity and what you see as the minimum best practices to have within an organization, a nonprofit, to protect against a security attack.
Well, I'll talk a little bit about what we do, and then maybe I'll get some correction from others on the panel and some more advice on how we can better supplement. So we start out by one, trying to educate people. So our onboarding covers cybersecurity now. It didn't used to, but now that's a thing that is covered. And we talk about phishing, smishing, that kind of thing that could occur, just to make people aware that yes, it does happen here. Because as I said earlier, people might not be thinking that it could happen at a nonprofit, but it certainly can. We also have checklists of who has access to what information, and we segment the amount of information that might be personally identifiable, that kind of thing, with each staff member, and it's awarded to them on a need-to-know basis. So not every person who's on our team has access to everything. So, and I think we tier it as well to try to mitigate some of that risk also. And I think that those things that we're doing are great, but I'm sure that we could be doing more. We use something called LastPass, and it's a password generator. So we shy away from people making up passwords that they might feel are very memorable to them, and using that same one on every site that they're logging into. And this way, that password generator generates weird things that you would never think of. And we try to keep them all safe that way. And we have that here. And that's something that's given to people on their first day here at work. So that's what we're doing now. So I'm interested to hear more things we could be doing.
No, I think you were going to add into that a little bit.
Yeah, I think Angie's doing a number of good things. Some ones to call out are understanding your access and who has access to what, which is the critical data that Jeff mentioned earlier that has value to the adversary. The LastPass is a particular one that I'm very fond of, right? Password management for your people, so that they're not using the same and simple passwords through multiple different applications that you use. Some other areas to kind of look at is it's around the principle of kind of what's called zero trust, right? So when I think about that, there are three kind of key portions of that. It's your identity. When you think about things in the digital world, it's your identity that allows you access to the assets of your not-for-profit that allow you to complete your mission. It's data, right? How do you protect your data if you have proprietary data or customer or client data that you don't want to leave? How do you make sure that it stays inside your walls? And the last piece is kind of around your devices, right? So making sure that only the right people have access to the correct devices. And you want to find ways to do that as cheaply as possible. So key things around that are kind of MFA, right? So multi-factor authentication wherever you can to whatever applications you have, ensuring that's enabled. Similar to what Angie said around the password management, that's how you protect your identities, right? And then the data piece, there are some more advanced kind of strategies that you can have other than just kind of an access list or Excel spreadsheet of who has access to what, right? But knowing where your critical data lies and almost having kind of a data inventory about knowing what you want to protect. Within our organization, we have I think it's 5 classifications of data, but business, personal, and public are things you don't need to apply any protections to. But knowing where your sensitive or confidential data is and making sure that maybe you've applied additional protections in those arenas to make sure that that doesn't leave your organization are really kind of some key areas that I would look at initially. And with that, I'll hand it over to Jeff too.
Yeah, really quick, I think, those are all great. One thing, and Kim touched on this a little bit in that opening slide about percentage of attacks and, where they're coming from, and phishing being a big one. If you're looking at very basic tools, right, the very basic things you can do, there's the idea of, hey, you secure your network, you think about firewalls. And you're securing your users, as Noah talked about, with identity multi-factor authentication, so that I'm not just using a password. Like most of us are probably doing this now with our financial organizations, where you're getting through their app or through a text, you're getting that, hey, I logged in, let me verify this is you, let me verify that you are in the place I expect you to be, or that you didn't log in from North Carolina 5 minutes ago and now are logging in from Aruba, or something to that effect. And the other pieces, I think that's very valuable in that, or a couple of pieces: email security, right? And making sure, that's probably a tool to invest in if you're just looking at tools, is like email security for sure, because that's where things are coming through. That's where the phishing is coming through at. It's coming through in your emails, in your users' emails. And also that awareness training. Again, Kim spoke about that, or it was in the slides. Sorry, that as we got introduced to the session here, we talked about, there's a slide about awareness training that Aparo has, and that just in itself, and making your users more aware of what could be coming about those phishing attacks, about how to handle email, about how to handle these things. I think it's really a best practice now, where that used to be, kind of an add-on of down the road, I might do that. I think that's a critical piece of anybody's security posture now, is to make sure they're training users on how to deal with potential cybersecurity threats and how those may manifest in the organization.
So Jeff, talk a little bit more about that. We had some specific things we used at Aparo, tools, because we're moving now out of overall into kind of best processes and tools. What do you suggest a nonprofit do? What can they access that can actually train their people not to click on links, and remind them on an ongoing basis? What are some things that companies use, or that you've seen used to do that?
So there's a lot of tools out there. I mean, and I think before, we can mention some, but before we jump into tools, I will always say, the most important thing to do is to make sure that with any, best practices around your cybersecurity posture, is to come up with your policies and procedures. You need to have, above all else, have something documented, have something like, this is how we're going to handle the different areas of, as it relates to us on security, how we handle events, how we handle email, how we handle, something like sensitive data potentially in email. Because if you don't have a policy to go along with that, then you're kind of just going to be knee-jerk reacting, putting tools in, and maybe just trying to, duct tape over holes and as they come up, rather than having a plan and then finding the tools that fit your plan. And I think that'd be a common theme we'll talk about throughout this, is that, you don't want to match your policies to the tools you put in place. You want to make sure that the tools are matching your procedures and policies that fit you best as an organization. So that's where I always start, is make sure you understand, who do we need to be trained? Like, so when you talk about training, it's, understand who's interacting with what data. We don't want to, you don't want to burden your users with maybe training that doesn't apply to them. You want to be able to target even your users, even, your employees and the people that work with you, on areas that they may deal with, so that it is more relevant. So understanding who's using what type of data, who may be exposed to certain type of risk, and then finding the tools that fit that. And there's a ton. I mean, there's probably the most well-known right now is KnowBe4. And that's probably, I mean, that's kind of the big tool in the industry that everybody uses, and they use video series, and it almost feels like sitcoms, and It's almost that show you get used to waiting for and watching, weekly to see what happens next. But it has things that go along with this. There's also, I mean, this is becoming such a big area that so many people do it now, and so many products do it now. A lot of the email security tools do it, and there's some tools that will do. You can do trainings, but you can also do internal campaigns yourself within the tools. So again, just an example of one, there's a company called Iron Scales, it's an email security tool, and they from their tool will filter emails, but you can also conduct your own internal campaigns to see maybe who within your organization is click happy on emails. And when they click on an email, they will get auto enrolled in the appropriate training. And so they kind of get the whole aspect and the whole, soup to nuts of that, of being told, without publicly shaming, right? Being told, hey, you probably shouldn't have clicked on this. Hey, here's some training. Why don't you go look this? And it helps, make them more aware. So like I said, I always start with policy and procedures, but there are plenty of tools. I think some of it you have to go look at what your organization looks like, because there's going to be tools that are built more, right? Just depending on for the type of audience, right? If you have a more technical audience, if it's not a more technical audience, if it's in certain, you're working in certain verticals or with certain other organizations, or there's going to be trainings that fit more appropriately with each one. So understanding what you need first, and then working with someone who can help you find the right person to apply in there. But yeah, but like I said, Know Before is the big one. If you're just talking pure tools, Iron Scales, email, Proofpoint on email, Mimecast on email, those are all big email security tools. Microsoft plays in there if you have Microsoft licensing, and I know a lot of nonprofits get Microsoft licensing for free or for highly discounted, and they have their own tools in there as well. So it's just kind of seeing what's available to you and then where you need to fill in your gaps.
Yeah, and I could talk to Iron Scales personally. We use it at Aparo. We love it. And we have a relationship with them too, so we can help you gain access to that if you want to learn about that. It's a AI tool, so it learns more as you report things as phishing. It learns more and more about your company. So that's just an aside, should anybody want to do that. And on the policy front, I'll also put a plug-in for Aparo. We can also help you with that. We have some templates. And if we need something deeper than a template, we can also bring in a skilled volunteer team to help with policies. Because definitely what Jeff is talking about, you don't have a policy, you don't know what to do when it happens, and then you're reacting. A little bit further into best processes, a question came up from the group before this panel about mobile device management and mobile application management. What are some best practices around that for folks that's a real Angie, you were talking when we were doing the prep about how, and us too, we don't give our employees cell phones. We have, that's my phone. So how do I save that when people are coming and going for companies? How do we keep it safe while they're here?
Right. Yeah, that's something that is a concern of mine. So we all bring our own devices to work. And in addition to that, a number of us, myself included, I have like my own little laptop that I bring around because it's just a little lighter and more nimble to carry around. But I am accessing our databases and our information utilizing that device also. So what we've been doing, and I'm sure there's a better way, is we use things like Slack and stuff like that too, where we're having a lot of chatter about what's going on in the organization, which really is proprietary information we would not want to get out. So if somebody's leaving the company, what we do is we say, may I have your device? And that person gives us the device, and then we would remove or watch them remove Slack, their email, that kind of thing from the device. And that works for us because in where we are right now, we have an on-premises work environment. We're housing patients and families that are traveling for medical treatment. So folks are coming here, folks are working here. But that would not be as ideal if for some reason we didn't have an amicable splitting with somebody who was an employee of ours. I'm not sure how that would work best in that case. So there has to be another way. And I know in talking to Jeff and Noah, they mentioned a few things before that we may be able to do that are a little less reliant, once again, on this very kind of unsuspicious
Trusting environment.
workforce trust environment that we have here. So there are other things I'm sure that we could be doing, but I do want to make sure we do have two-factor authentication. So I think that at least that's good too, with people getting into things. But what else is there?
So from our experience, we ran into a very similar problem at Train, right? We will pay for the line of service, but we don't pay for the phone. The phone is actually the employees and they own it. So then there are two kind of approaches. One is called mobile device management. You may have heard the acronym MDM, and there's also mobile application management, MAM, for mobile devices. We're a big Microsoft shop, so I know within the not-for-profit premium licensing at Microsoft, they have some capabilities with Intune. So we use what is called mobile application management. So it's still my phone, but I have our Outlook client, I have our Office suite on there, I have select tools that support Train. If I were to leave the organization, they shut off my Active Directory account and they can go in and wipe those applications off my phone without actually having to physically touch my device. And then it doesn't touch any of my personal data either. So it's almost like creating a small box on my personal device that just says, this is our business stuff, right? And we want to protect our business data on that device. So if you want the convenience of using that and having 24/7 tethered to work, we need the ability to remove that. And that's another big factor to think about with the results of the pandemic and a lot of organizations being work remotely. The historical approach was you create a very hard exterior and everything inside your network, everything inside your control, your devices, you lock that outside down very hard and you're okay, you're protected. But now that kind of what we would call a perimeter to an organization no longer exists because people are flowing in and out, bringing their personal iPads, their personal phones, they're working from home. Sometimes they use VPN, sometimes they're using SaaS applications. So you have to really kind of secure each device. And if it's somebody's personal device, you don't want to infringe on their personal privacy. So the solution really is mobile application management, MAM.
Mobile application management.
Yeah. Jeff, feel free to add anything there that you have as well.
No, I mean, I think that's right. I mean, I mean, again, Noah hit on a very important thing there of understanding, right, that a lot of what you're going to be working with nowadays is SaaS-based applications. I mean, anyone who, especially you think about in the Microsoft or Google world, you have Google Drive, you have SharePoint, you have OneDrive, you have all these capabilities for data to move from those applications into other areas, right, that you may not be aware of, and it may not be something that users are trying to do to be malicious. It may just be that they're trying, your internal people are trying to do their job and trying to be flexible and trying to put something somewhere where they can get to it, just to work maybe while they're on vacation or out or somewhere else on a different device, and so things start moving around. So understanding the application, understanding the data, being able to monitor that and how data moves, I think outside of just the applications themselves and monitoring, just this is a bigger conversation outside mobile devices, but just understanding, where your data is and the tool sets that can help you keep your data secure and help you understand where data is moving. The other thing I wanted to add in there, because Noah mentioned something about, you're like, hey, they turn off my Active Directory account, and then it starts, then they go through these processes of locking things out, and Angie was mentioning how they have processes and procedures in place. Something that I think everybody should be thinking about now, just to eliminate some of the human areas, like identity lifecycle management and tools that can help you automate and orchestrate that process of onboarding and offboarding people, so that when you have people and their devices and their tools, right, we're all human. We can all make errors if we try to go through a process step by step and we're manually doing all this. And anything around security is much better serviced when you can automate that process and make sure it happens the same way every time. And identity lifecycle management becomes very important in this, to where, hey, we have a user that's leaving, we tag that they're leaving, and then there's this whole process, including their like mobile device and their mobile app management and turning off access and making sure that data is locked or that data is removed. That can happen. So just tagging that in, because Noah mentioned like turning off Active Directory and user access, and I think that's an important piece, is understanding your identity lifecycle management within your organization.
Well, the identity lifecycle management sounds like a really scary thing to me as a nonprofit. I'm like, what the heck does that mean? Where does that live? And how do I pay for it? And I'm wondering if this is a good time to segue into third-party questions and begin with that one. Talk a little bit more about what that mouthful is to somebody who doesn't have a lot of money to do it.
Yeah. So again, the good thing is with that, I think, there's a lot of people out there that do it. There's a lot of identity and access management tools that play in this area. And a lot of them you probably already have at your fingertips, Microsoft being one of them. Right. So Microsoft, especially if you're using Office 365, M365, you're probably already using Active Directory, you're creating users there. If you go look at Microsoft's identity lifecycle management policies and things they can do, they play in that space. Another big one that plays in the identity space, Okta. A lot of organizations use Okta. It's OKTA. That's how you spell it. They're a big player in that. There's One Identity, CyberArk. There's Duo. Those are some of the big names if you're just looking at tooling. But again, you go with like Microsoft, you might already have access to that. But all these tool sets can help you automate that process of, hey, this is where users, this is kind of the one source of truth for our users. And we're using these tool sets, not just for MFA, what we talked about before, where you have multi-factor authentication. So you're using passwords in like an app to authenticate where you are, and location helps authenticate where you are, but also single sign-on, right? So SSO, so that you're using one tool to help your users log on to all the applications they may use. That makes it simpler for them to work, but also makes it simpler for you to control. So now you don't have to worry about 7, 8, 9, 10 different logins that you have to go disable. Right? You disable at one point, and then that stops the access across all the different tools you may use as an organization if you're using single sign-on. And then those tools can also start the process of, again, automating that flow of, okay, this is what happens next. This, I shut off, like, this user loses access, which means they can't log on to these tools anymore, which means it maybe locks them out of certain applications on their mobile device if it's their own. It may kick off a process that actually turn a mobile device. But a lot of those tools will do that automated process. Again, you need to have that process first, though. You need to understand what your particular process is to start down that path.
So we've got a question in here, and it kind of relates to what you're saying is, so Microsoft Office, good. And we've got a question later to talk about Google and how that is good too. But if you look at, you've got Microsoft Office 365, M365, and that's great for your data internally in the documents that you've got. What about your other tools? Like you've got, no, if I've got CRM and I've got QuickBooks, how do I secure those? What's going on there?
So I'd like to, you mentioned something earlier, Kim, that I kind of want to touch on, right? Identity lifecycle management, that can be a scary term, right?
Yes.
So I really believe in kind of taking those terms and trying to break them down into things that people can kind of understand. So let's put ourselves in the kind of the world of make believe and imagine there's no technology. You were doing identity lifecycle management before, right? So think about it back in, say, the 70s, right? If you were to hire somebody then, what would you do? You would give them a key to the front door, right? That's giving them their digital identity, their username these days. That lets them in the office, right? And then identity lifecycle management, access management that Jeff was talking about. Well, I want them to get into the mail room, but not the accounting room. Well, that's a different key that's associated to that master key, right? So anything that you can think of that may be a scary term, if you have a third-party IT service provider, push them to put it into layman's terms that will help you understand, because fundamentally the same things we had to do before technology existed, we do today, right? So identity lifecycle management is the same thing as kind of employee lifecycle management. There are steps you take when the employee gets hired. There are steps you take when somebody leaves for FMLA, for maternity, and there are steps you take when people are terminated. It's the same thing, just applied digitally. Now, going back to your question about how do you protect other applications, Angie had a very good answer at the beginning, right? She has the list that says, hey, these people have access to these things. So that gives you the checklist to go back through and say, I got to figure out how to turn these off. Now, Jeff took that to a different level of maturity with things like single sign-on, right? So if you have Microsoft 365 and QuickBooks, a lot of times, and I can't speak directly because we don't use QuickBooks at my organization, but there'll be a way to use or enable single sign-on for QuickBooks using that Microsoft identity or that Microsoft username, so that if you were to shut it off within your M365 admin console, it would potentially kill the QuickBooks access. Now, if that doesn't exist, or if you're using MFA tools like Jeff was talking about, a lot of those have that single sign-on capability as well. If that doesn't exist, then it's, you go back to the manual solution like Angie had, and you go back down through your checklist, and you go in and you turn it off, right? But Jeff also made very good points about your policies and procedures. You need to document all these things that you need to do when you bring somebody on. What did you give them? Now, if they're exiting your organization, what do you need to turn off now, right? You can do that digitally or you can do that manually. But ultimately, what you want to do to protect your data and your house is take away those keys. So, I mean, if there are any kind of follow-ons, I can follow up on that, but
Well, I'm going to ask you even another, and I'm going to take it even another level. Give us layman's term for single sign-on, Noah.
Okay, so single sign-on. You typically have a username that you sign into your PC with. If you're using Microsoft 365, sometimes that's your full email address, right? Sometimes that's the first part before the @ symbol. But single sign-on means you take that username and link it through all of your other applications. So you sign in once, and then that account works everywhere else as your identifier. And it's the same password. It's typically the same authentications.
That sounds more risky to
too.
me, because now if they get into one thing, they can get into all my other applications. Why would I want them to do that?
And therein lies the beauty of MFA. And if you're using a large provider like Google, or you're using a large provider like Microsoft, you're not reliant on your own security protections. It's how they protect those identity data in the cloud. We rely on Microsoft, right? We use that as our single sign-on. There are risks with it, but it simplifies your business enablement too. Fundamentally, the purpose of a not-for-profit, it isn't to be great at IT or IT security. Right. It's to achieve their mission, right? So making your technology assets easier to use while secure is the ultimate goal. The best way to secure something is to unplug it from everything and stick it under the ground, but you really can't do anything with that asset, right? So you have to find that middle ground of what's going to do enablement for you to achieve your mission while still being the faster guy out of the two running away from the bear.
So I want to go back because I think we might have lost a little folks on this, one single sign-on and MFA. Let's also talk about MFA. What's that? One person asked, does MFA means multi-factor authentication? Yeah. And so you're talking about what? What does that mean in the layman's terms? What's going to happen? Does it happen for every single app differently? Does it happen once for all your apps? What does that mean, multi-factor authentication?
So the answer to that question is yes. And
that's not okay. Wait a minute. I can't let you go with that answer.
I know. That's a simple answer. And also the typical IT answer also applies here. It depends.
Yeah, thank you.
Throw that one out as well. So yeah, multi-factor authentication. If you think about how the simplest way to think about it is it is a password is a factor. So a multi-factor authentication means there is going to be multiple ways you have to sign in, right? It's more than just a password. So typically that starts with two-factor authentication. And like I said, you may see this with your bank today. That's a very popular place, is that when I log into my bank with my username and password, the first thing they're probably going to do is send me a text with a 6-digit code that I have to put in. That's the second form of authentication. So that's evolved today to multi-factor authentication. So again, using the example of my bank, I log in and I put in this code. And if I'm not on, if they don't recognize, right, the computer I'm coming from, because they've cached that address or they've, used cookies and other things, but they don't recognize the location I'm coming from, they may ask me a security question, one of my security questions also, or they may limit my access, or may, send a separate email. And so that's where you get into multi-factor, right? There are multiple steps I have to verify myself through to make sure I am who I say I am and not just a password.
And to answer the direct question that was asked about, do you have to use that for every app, or do you have it just for one?
Not necessarily.
Yeah. So
Right.
I'll let Noah talk on this. I just wanted to kind of use the example of some apps may allow it, some apps may not. Sometimes it depends on the app. You can, but this is where, tying back to what Noah was talking about with single sign-on, that's where single sign-on can become important, because now I can kind of put all those apps into one platform that can do, once I'm authenticated, like once I do those multi-steps and I'm operating off the same device, I can just get into everything because it's verified. You are who you say you are, and you're working off this device that I am aware of and that I know about. This laptop you're working off of is a secure device that I'm aware of. You've authenticated yourself. You are who you say you are. Now I'll let you get to all of your company's apps, everything that's registered for your single sign-on. And you probably use this, one more thing, and I know Noah has input on this, but just as an example of how you're probably doing this in day-to-day life is, there are a lot of things now. If you have a Gmail account, that when you go to set up an account, it will say, do you want to use Gmail? And you can just click on your Gmail account. And so like I have that, and I have multi-factor authentication turned on for my Gmail account, so that if somebody ever tried to log into my Gmail account or use my Gmail account to log into another service where that service allows your Gmail account to be used as authentication, they could try to hack, maybe they've hacked my password and they put it in, I'm going to get a text, right? I'm going to get a notification on my Google app that says someone is trying to log into your account, approve or deny. And again, there's that multi-factor authentication stopping them. And because I've linked accounts, now I don't have to worry about tracking that, right? So Kim, to your point, does it make it less secure? I mean, it seems that way, but it puts the information centrally. So now I don't have to worry about tracking 7, 8, 9 different accounts that somebody may be trying to hack and attack. I've got it all right there with one account, secure with Google. So sorry, Noah, I know you have a lot to say there.
Yeah, you're fine. I'll say, kind of putting it in layman's terms, right? I had somebody explain it to me really well with multi-factor authentication, and it's something you have, something you know, or something you are. Pick two, and that's multi-factor, right? So that's something you have, like Jeff was talking about, is that one-time passcode that they text you, right? Something you know is your username and your password, right? And then something you are is, you've seen iPhones, all of your mobile devices, your thumbprint, your Face ID, that's biometrics, right? So real simple, something you have, something you know, or something you are. Pick two, and that's multi-factor. And that allows the system to say, okay, it's irrefutable, they are who they say they are. Even if an adversary is successful with a phishing attempt and they're able to get your username and password, because they won't have that element of the something you have or something you are, your biometric or your one-time passcode, the authentication won't work. So ultimately, the key you granted is no longer works for them. I wanted, there are a number of questions in the chat.
I know.
Should
I
we
was
tackle
gonna-
some of those, Kim,
I
or
want to
no?
make sure that we talk about, we're going to jump to it later in our conversation here. We've only got 10 minutes left, but one of the things, Google versus Microsoft, you know, we've referenced several times in the call here today about Microsoft having, you know, behind the scenes levels of security that protect you and make sure that, you know, you have it, you don't need to worry about it too much because they're worrying about it at a much bigger level behind you. So you're protected because they're protecting. Is it the same with Google?
So I'll go super quick, Jeff, and then I'll hand off to you, right? When the answer is yes, right? Both are capable of security that meets the requirements of any not-for-profit as well as any commercial grade publicly traded company, right? It's all in how it's configured. But before you go, is this secure? Is that secure? Which one's more secure? I'm going to go back to your not-for-profit mission. What are you trying to do? The partners that you interact with, what tools do they use? Because fundamentally it's two different ecosystems, right? So you have the Google ecosystem, which means you're going to use Google Docs and Google Drive and Gmail and those elements, right? If you have a lot of vendors that use that space, great, you can make Google secure. If you're a Microsoft shop and you have a lot of people in the Microsoft world, and they use Excel and Word documents more prevalently than Google Docs, right? And OneDrive, they have very similar offerings, they're just different. So figure out which ecosystem works best for your organization, and that should drive your decision, not which one is more secure than the other, because you can secure both to, I promise, a level that is sufficient for your organization.
One of the things you guys talked about when we were prepping for this call was, and I thought it summarized that pretty well, was, you know, if you're working with a lot of corporations, 90% of corporations, if not more, are on Microsoft. So make it easy for yourself. Use a tool that's going to communicate with them easily. If you're working in the educational space, you know, I don't know what the percentage is, 90, 80% of the educational space is using Google. So make it easy for yourself and do that. So, you know, some of those are kind of your basic to kind of articulate even more what Noah was saying on a very granular level. Anything else you want to add to that, Jeff?
No, I mean, I think that's spot
Okay.
on. What you're saying, right?
Then I'm going to move to cookies. What are they? Somebody tell me what cookies are and why should I be worried about them? Do I enable them? Do I accept all? Do I forget everything? What do I do?
Yeah, that's it. I think people become more aware of that now because of government regulations requiring all those pop-ups you see when you go to websites now that say, hey, this site uses cookies, and do you want to accept? Do you want to reject? Do you want to I mean, that is at a very basic level, it's, you know, think of it's like the crumbs you leave behind that kind of, you know, give the trail of, hey, I've been to this website before, I have interacted with this website before. You know, if you're accepting those cookies, it allows those websites to gather, you know, not personal information unless you type that in, but like on a basic level, they can tell, you know, kind of what location, like where in the world are you accessing from, some basic information about, you know, your browser. And that's why you, like, if you go to a website with Chrome and then you visit that website later with a different browser like Safari, you may not have the same experience because it's saved on a browser by browser basis. So Chrome has that Chrome has saved cookies for that website on your computer, right? And so it's just basically a way for them to track at a very basic level how you've interacted with their web page in a past visit, so that they can tailor make things. So this is where when everybody says Facebook is listening to me, right? You know, the things you interact and the ads you interact with Facebook, you know, those save cookies, and then other apps can read those cookies to target ads back to you for things like marketing. So it's just this little trail of data that these web pages are saving, you know, kind of on your computer in accessible places on your computer for, you know, them to read back or other web pages to read back. That let them know like your trail of where you've been. Like I said, it's kind of the cookie crumb or the crumbs trail of, oh, I know that my child has been through this house because I can follow the trail of candy paper up the stairs and kind of know what they did.
So if I accept cookies, it's going to make my shopping experience a little better and my user experience on the particular website better. but does it increase my cybersecurity risk, particularly if I'm doing it on a work PC? Noah?
Not necessarily. It will make your shopping experience better. It may also end up hitting you with a lot more spam email. Cookies inherently don't necessarily weaken your security position, but it spreads your data. And I like to think of it like digital dust, right? So if you remember the Hansel and Gretel story where everybody, they take little breadcrumbs and they drop them along to figure out their path. Now, in our day and age, everything you do creates digital dust, but instead of breadcrumbs, they're cookies. Cookies are your new digital dust that show where you've been and what you've done, and people can use that to to get you additional information that they think you may be interested in and more likely to buy their product because of, or send you emails and happy birthday advertisements and all sorts of things. So I
Okay,
hope that
so-
makes it clear.
Quick question. Yes or no? You can only say one word, yes or no. Do you accept cookies?
The minimum required.
I
Yeah.
do, but I'm a shopper.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I've gotten to the point where I just always just accept them. I'm like,
I
I'm
just
not
always
gonna deal with
accept
this. I just accept them. Jeff?
I
Yes,
yeah,
no?
I reject all. So no.
Reject all,
Like,
okay.
we reject all except what I have to, what they force
Yeah.
me
All
to.
right. All right. Did you see any other question or Noah that I missed that you wanted to address on the?
No, I think that
Okay.
that covered
I
most
want to
of
ask
them.
one other question. We've only got 4 minutes left, so this is a quick answer. And I'm going to start with Noah. We kind of didn't touch on this completely. Outsourced cybersecurity companies.
Mhm.
It's a good way for nonprofits to think about, maybe I could get somebody who knows how to do this because I've got nobody internally, nobody. And so, yeah, great. Set up my Microsoft system well. Super. Okay, somebody helped me do that and it's done. But now I don't know what to do. So maybe I should hire somebody outside. Is that a good thing? Is it expensive? What do I look for?
I would highly advocate doing that. As Angie mentioned, every not-for-profit has a mission. I think very few of their missions are to be the best at cybersecurity in the not-for-profit world. So if it is not your core competency nor part of your mission, I would highly advise kind of deferring to an expert. Cybersecurity, we have a function within our organization. We're 16 billion, and we still outsource portions of it because we don't have the internal expertise. What do you look for? Whew, that could be a very broad topic. What I would say, Google is your friend, right? Do some general questions and about what should I look for in that. It can be wide and it can be varied, but that would also be very specific to your industry. I would look for people that play for IT support in your industry, healthcare, outsource providers, IT outsourcing. It's specific to healthcare, and there are certain regulations and requirements that you got to cover there, right? Same thing educationally, same thing for, say, a dental office. So there are niche providers of third-party services for all kinds of different industries, and the questions you would ask should be different. So the best thing to do is go unprepared, right? And then do a cost versus benefit analysis, right? You really need a real crisp vision because the goal of those firms is to typically sell you as much as they can possibly sell you. So really know what you want. What is your baseline, right? What is going to make you faster than the other guy running away from the bear? I keep going back to that because that's really where you need to be. And that's ultimately how I'd approach that. And using the other resources.
I'm going to give 1 minute to Jeff. You have a 1 minute response on that. If you, and you are an outsourced provider. So, what would you say to the folks on the line? What should they ask you if you know it's going to be a minimal contract because they don't have a lot of money?
Yeah, I mean, it's so this is, something we do day in and day out, and not that we do the security, but we represent firms that do this, and there are different levels, right? And I think that's the biggest thing. When we work with our clients, we're helping them understand, what do you need? Do you need somebody to come in and bring the tools as well and manage everything? Do you need somebody to just help with certain tools, or do you need somebody to just monitor your environment, right? So there's a concept of a managed security service provider, an MSSP. There's the concept of managed detection and response, and MDR, which is just going to say, hey, we'll watch your environment 24/7. We're kind of going to be like your security guys that just sit out here and monitor and let you know when something's going on. And I think it's just, right, the more you get into hands-on, the further you get into more hands-on, the more expensive it's going to be. So it's really tailoring those and bringing multiple options so that you look at. You shouldn't just look at one, look at multiple ones to decide what fits best for your need and hear from all. That's also going to help you with costs anytime you're looking at these. Always look at multiple providers because it always is going to put them in competition with each other, which helps you on the pricing of things as well.
Thank you so much. We could do this for another half an hour because there's so much more that these folks could share with you. It's just a wonderful panel of folks who gives just a wide breadth of experience that I hope everyone today learned as much as I did. I just really appreciate all of you. Yenting, is there anything else we need to do or that we missed that I didn't catch or somebody didn't catch?
Well, thank you everyone on the panel, and thank you, Kim, for leading this conversation. Really great conversation today. I know we missed a couple of questions, so what I might do, if it's okay with Jeff, Noah, and Angie, I might send you some of those questions by email. If you can respond, I will put that in the follow-up email. Thank you everyone for participating with us today. Jeff and Noah are actually going to be coming back to lead the upcoming weekly webinars, so please come back for those. And that's it. We're at 1 o'clock. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody.